let's cut to the chase. 2017 will go down as one of the best years in video games. Regardless of your genre preferences, you've likely enjoyed the past 12 months as much as I have. And while I think it's probably still too soon to dissect what made 2017 so great, if I had to wager a guess, it would all point to Risk. Nearly everything I played was a net positive just by breaking from convention. And in a sequel-driven industry where success is largely built from here's more of the same but prettier, this year proved to be far more ambitious. Not just in quality, but unprecedented quantity. Almost every month ushered in yet another instant hit that would easily qualify for Game of the Year. Simply put, 2017 was staggeringly good, and this means my list will obviously differ from yours. So don't be shy, share and celebrate your personal favorites in the comments below. Now without further ado and no honorable mentions, here are the 10 best games of 2017. Number 10. Resident Evil 7. It was almost inevitable the Resident Evil franchise would shamble its way to current generation consoles. If nothing else, the name recognition from the popular films meant Capcom had money on the table. But few could have anticipated the bold, genre-transcending direction this latest entry would take, mixing the survival horror elements of the original trilogy with the now popular first-person perspective of the genre. Resident Evil 7 is both a hard pivot and a return to form. Scaling back the series' recent globe-trotting adventures to a single neighborhood makes every terrifying event more personal and visceral. But Capcom cleverly retained the action and combat-heavy gameplay of the most recent entries, and the results are almost unrecognizable as a Resident Evil game. Beyond the scattered references around the Baker estate, you'd likely never know of the canonical connection. But it's the grotesque monsters, grimy environments, and obscene gore, as well as a surprisingly excellent VR mode, that make Resident Evil 7 a worthy successor to this classic horror franchise. Number 9. Cuphead. Designing a hard game is easy. Just put enough obstacles in the way of the player and you're halfway there. And yes, while it can be aggressively challenging, Cuphead is never unfair. Grueling run-and-gun boss battles repeatedly obliterate the game's adorable heroes, but in every loss, there's a lesson. You're not meant to survive on your first try, you're expected to learn and adapt through multiple attempts. And in that respect, Cuphead is more about pattern memorization and not at all like the pointlessly obtuse arcade shooters that influenced it. Once over the initial frustration hump, enemy attacks begin to resemble earlier battles, skills slowly develop, and hours later, overcoming devastating bosses becomes second nature. But the sense of accomplishment never dwindles, and neither does the sense of awe. Cuphead brilliantly captures the golden age aesthetics of 1920s and 30s cartoons, turning seemingly gentle characters into sadistic instruments of torture, menacing to the beat of beautifully arranged ragtime and swing music. If you're an animation fan, there's a plethora of references from this often overlooked era. Either way, Cuphead is a must-play. Just remember to be patient. Number 8. Splatoon 2. Remember when I said 2017 was the year of taking risks? Well, this might be the one exception to that. Splatoon 2 is actually more of the same, but when you consider there's nothing else like it, is that really a bad thing? In case you're unaware, Splatoon centers around 2 teams of 4 covering a map in their team's ink. The rules change from mode to mode, but the focus is always on the environment rather than direct conflict, and this creates an amazing, frenetic atmosphere. New to the series is the wonderfully chaotic Salmon Run, a 4-player co-op horde mode where squids must battle the frightening creatures of the deep sea. It's a great change of pace, and really shows off the longevity of the ink-based combat. But Splatoon 2's originality also stems from its unique attitude. There's a youthful spirit pulsing through every weapon, stage, and character design, and this carries over into the music. The superb soundtrack is easily one of the best of the year. Splatoon 2 might be a half step more than a full sequel, but its confident execution proves the Squid Kids are here to stay. Number 7. Persona 5. Okay, full disclosure, I never beat Persona 5. With an especially busy spring season combined with the game's 100-hour length, I couldn't find the time to get more than a third of the way through. But to its credit, Persona 5 left an indelible mark because of its relatable cast of characters, not only in its charming protagonist, but in the everyday villains they battle. There's a lot of social issues here that haven't been explored in other JRPGs or most AAA games. And while I'm not going to spoil any of the details, and yes, some of the writing is over the top, it's thrilling to watch these teenagers overturn power structures and challenge authority by cutting through the socially acceptable shades of gray and putting a stop to evil. And if that sounds a bit too serious, I remind you this is a game about entering an individual's ego in the form of an imaginary dungeon to fight monsters and swipe sentimental relics. It's basically Ocean's 11 meets Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And this is perfectly blended with the clever turn-based combat. Every enemy is vulnerable to specific attacks, encouraging players to carefully adjust their party to exploit weaknesses. And even when grinding, the quick action remains energetic thanks to the catchy funk soundtrack and stylistic manga visuals. But just as important are the quiet moments of high school life and hanging out with friends, which makes the grandiose superhero escapades all the more rewarding. It took Atlus nearly 9 years to develop Persona 5, and it's clear none of that time went to waste. Number 6. Yakuza Zero. It's been a long time coming, but it feels like 2017 was the year Yakuza finally broke through to Western audiences. And a lot of that has to do with the perception of it being a wacky Japanese game. But this sells the entire concept short. Sure, there's some more extravagantly odd moments, but there's also a constant spark of imagination. Yakuza Zero isn't being weird for weird's sake, it's competing with itself, pushing the most interesting idea to the forefront, even if it doesn't exactly fit with the rest of the story. Need some incredibly fun mini-games? Here's 20. Want some comedic side stories? There's nearly 100. And that's not even mentioning the action-packed main campaign, showing the death of a criminal generation. As the name implies, Zero is a prequel to the rest of the series, but rather than showing how the pieces came together, it focuses on the characters and what their lives nearly became during the booming economy of the 1980s. And if that doesn't pique your interest, well, have a look at this over-the-top combat. Just look at that! Yakuza Zero is a great starting point for newcomers, and another fantastic sequel for longtime fans. Number 5. The Evil Within 2. There's a strong chance you didn't play this one. As of November 2017, The Evil Within 2 has already fallen off the top 20 best-selling games list, less than a month after its release. This is likely due to the fan reception of the truly awful original game, and while I also disliked the first title, The Evil Within 2 is one of the most daring games I've played in years, taking all of the eye-rolling plot devices of brain networks, comedically evil corporations, and laughably stupid conspiracies, and using them as the foundation for a surprisingly sober and touching story. There's so much about The Evil Within 2 that shouldn't work. It's an open-world, stealth, survival horror game, and yet slaying zombies with a quick knife to the head is constantly satisfying and tense. This escape from reality also allows the artist to freely transform realistic objects and environments into dreamlike moodscapes. It's a morbidly beautiful, heartbreaking, evocative title that expresses the nature of family, relationships, religion, and art, and how each can be used as a force of death and destruction. For all of its ridiculous caveats, The Evil Within 2 is one of the most emotionally potent experiences of this generation. Don't skip The Evil Within 2. Number 4. Horizon Zero Dawn. There was always an open question on whether or not Guerrilla Games would, or even could, leave the Killzone franchise behind. Horizon Zero Dawn is a resounding yes. Taking a hopeful look at the post-apocalypse, the protagonist Aloy wanders through the stunning, lush, naturalistic environments to save humanity from the roaming packs of machine animals. And as fanciful of an idea as that may be, Horizon always remains focused on the ground level of modern-day life, suggesting that regardless of circumstance, humans will always fall into dangerous patterns. Aloy bravely ignores these restrictions, confronting the mechanical beasts head-on in the surprisingly realistic hunting gameplay. Locating creatures to scrap their parts and craft advanced items never becomes a burden, thanks to the streamlined interface and tracking systems. And this is all brought together by the best graphics of 2017. Realism can be a divisive method, but it's the clashing styles of futurism and the Cretaceous period that makes the cartoonish elements feel plausible. Horizon's success comes from its scope. With a gigantic open world, mammoth enemies, and a lengthy optional backstory, Guerrilla Games has become a must-watch developer. Number 3. Super Mario Odyssey. Look, I get it. You're probably already sick of hearing how great Super Mario Odyssey is. I even did a video earlier this year talking about the game's overwhelmingly positive reception. But Super Mario Odyssey is a triumph of imagination, inviting players to travel disparate worlds. And I can't stress this idea enough. Many of the locations bear no resemblance to what came before, not just for Mario, but in Odyssey itself. Layered over this is the brand new camping mechanic, allowing Mario to transform and take hold of different objects and enemies, all of which feature unique abilities that feel just as polished as Mario's basic form, and this creates a strong desire to experiment, or in other words, play. Odyssey isn't about experiencing a story or prolonged world building, it's about the simple joy of movement and exploration, action inspired by curiosity, and just goofing off for fun. And just as it feels the game is coming to a close, old worlds are revamped with a plethora of new objectives. By embracing strange and original ideas, Super Mario Odyssey stands as one of the best 3D platformers of all time. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Zelda. Sure, there's been some undeniably excellent entries in the past, but for nearly 2 decades, it's felt like a series that was a victim of its own hype, repeating the tried and true systems to meet fan expectations while progressively losing its sense of adventure. Breath of the Wild abandons those familiar tropes in favor of player instinct. It's a game that suggests a list of objectives and then leaves the audience to discover the path on their own as they wander through the gorgeous and often dangerous landscape of Hyrule. And while an open world is already an exciting departure for the series, it's the added climbing system that makes Breath of the Wild stand out from its peers. There's an emphasis on dynamic weather and climate conditions, which frequently challenge Link but in a logical way, such as metal objects attracting lightning during a storm or rain making a cliffside slick. Everywhere is open if you can overcome the problem at hand. It's an environment built for free roaming with the polish of a traditional adventure game. And this idea is carried over into the best puzzles in Zelda history. Bombs, magnetism, and freezing abilities are now limitless, teasing players to find alternative routes and solutions. Likewise, the combat brings a newfound intensity to the series, with some brutally difficult boss battles. But that's really up to you. Do you focus on preparation or prefer challenge? With 120 shrines, 900 hidden Karaku seeds, and even secret story beats, the optional side activities are just as robust as the main quest. Breath of the Wild is more than a long-running series going back to its roots, or reinventing a classic franchise. It's a fresh take on role-playing games that overwhelmingly succeeds in nearly every aspect. Number 1. Nier Automata. Truth be told, it wasn't even close. While many of the other games on this list boast unique mechanics, vast landscapes, and gorgeous visuals, Nier Automata explores a myriad of philosophical concepts inside of a story that could only be told through a video game. That's not to sell the gameplay short. The blazing fast hack-and-slash combat is up there with the best of Platinum games, and the brilliant merger of top-down shooter and 3D action is unlike anything I've experienced before. Yes, taken on the merit of its gameplay alone, it would have likely still ended up on this list, but it's Nier Automata's astounding direction and meta-narrative that makes it the most important game of 2017. Initially, the plot resembles a boilerplate, melodramatic, anime-inspired tale of androids battling robots for control of Earth. But ever so often, the stoic presentation cracks, calling out the audience's suspicions. Soon, these hints overtake the central storyline to confront the very idea of video game protagonists and how their subjective goals often ignore the rest of the world's problems, or even the player's moral concerns. But Nier Automata isn't simply interested in tearing down and deconstructing video games, but building them back up to be stronger, smarter, and bigger than they were. If it sounds like I'm avoiding specific details, I am. But to just state the game's events wouldn't do Nier Automata justice. This isn't limited to pre-rendered cutscenes, but also common mechanics like shopping and customization. And this is how Nier Automata subtly meets player expectations before challenging them, delivering on its potential and then surpassing it. With a soundtrack that perfectly represents the war between machines and nature, art direction that slowly clues in the audience, and the signature Platinum gameplay, Nier Automata will be remembered as one of the best games of all time. But for now, it's the best game of 2017. And there you have it. Those were the best games of 2017, at least according to me. So if you have a top pick or a full list, head down to the comments and share your opinion. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Anyway, that's gonna have to do it for this video. Now go play some great games and have a happy new year.